What if the maid you mock suddenly became the owner of the mansion across the street? This is the powerful story of Rena and her mother, Mira, once humiliated, overworked, and treated like nobodies by their own relatives. But fate had other plans. After winning the lottery, they rose from servants to business owners. And what happened next will leave you speechless. Betrayal, redemption, and a twist you won't see coming. You need to hear how this ends. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below. And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories like this one. Rina tightened her ponytail and took a deep breath as she stepped into the dining room of the Santiago household. The smell of sizzling bacon and garlic-fried rice lingered in the air, but it didn't make her feel hungry. It made her tense. As always, her mother Mira stood beside her, silent and attentive, like shadows on the wall, ready to serve. The crystal chandelier above the table shimmered against the morning sunlight, but there was nothing warm about the scene below it. "Oh," Tina groaned, pushing her plate away. "Mom, the bacon is limp again. It's disgusting." Rina's stomach clenched. She had fried the bacon herself, just how Tina liked it. Extra crispy. But Tina, as usual, had come down 30 minutes late. "I made it crispy, Tina," Rena said calmly. "But you didn't come when we called you." Tina's glare sliced through the air. "So now you're blaming me for your failure? Wow. That's a new low even for a maid." "Don't talk back to my daughter," Marla snapped, setting her glass of orange juice down with a loud clink. Her eyes, sharp and cold, fixed on Rena. "You should be grateful we even let you live here. You and your mother were nothing before us." "We're not asking for charity," Rina replied, voice firm but respectful. "We work hard every day." Marla stood up. "Hard, please. If this is your version of hard work, then it's no wonder you'll stay poor forever." "Enough," Mira whispered, placing a gentle hand on Rena's arm. "Let it go." But Rina couldn't. She felt her heart beating faster, her face hot with humiliation. 3 years. That's how long they had worked here, scrubbing floors, preparing meals, running errands. And not once, had they been treated like family, despite the blood connection. Marla was her mother's older sister, but you'd never guess it by the way she barked orders like a queen commanding peasants. As Rina cleaned the kitchen later that day, she found herself mumbling under her breath. "They act like we're invisible. Until something's wrong. Then suddenly, we matter." "Don't carry the anger, Anak," Mira said gently, washing a pile of dishes at the sink. "God sees everything." "I know, Ma. But sometimes I wish he'd do something sooner." That night, while Mira dozed off in their tiny, tidy room tucked behind the laundry area, Rina sat on her cot and stared at the worn wallet resting on the nightstand. She reached for it, pulled out a folded piece of paper, the latest lottery ticket, and ran her thumb over the numbers. She whispered to herself, "Your birthday, mine, Papa's." Then 3 random numbers. Always the same formula. She could still hear Marla laughing in her head. "You think you'll ever live in a place like this? Keep dreaming, girl." Rina sighed and tucked the ticket away, then turned off the lamp. But as she lay there in the dark, she couldn't stop her mind from racing. What if one day she woke up and everything had changed? What if she could take her mother away from all this, to a home with soft beds and warm meals, where no one yelled, no one scowled, no one locked the pantry as if she were a thief? The next morning, the insults came early. Tina wanted her dress steamed. Marla wanted breakfast hotter. When Rina accidentally brushed against a crystal vase while cleaning, Marla hissed, "Careful. That's worth more than your life." Rina said nothing, but her hands trembled slightly as she wiped the counter. Mira saw it, walked over, and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Today will pass," Mira whispered, "just like the others." "But for how long?" Rena murmured back. "How long do we keep letting them walk over us, Ma?" Mira didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke volumes. Of years endured, of tears cried in silence, of dignity swallowed every single day for the sake of survival. That afternoon, as they walked to the public market under the scorching sun, Rina saw the small lotto booth at the corner. Something tugged at her. "Ma, wait," she said, pulling Mira gently toward the booth. Mira frowned.
"Again, Rina?"
"Just this once," Rina smiled. "Maybe today's the day everything changes." She dropped a few coins on the counter, filled out her numbers, and said a silent prayer. Let it be today. It was late evening when Rina returned from the market with Mira, her shoes dusty and her back aching from the weight of the groceries. They had barely stepped through the gate when Tina's voice pierced the air like a blade. "Rina, get in here," she shouted from the front porch, holding up a delicate blush-colored dress. "I need this ironed now. I'm going out early tomorrow, and I want it flawless." Rina sighed and set the grocery bag down gently by the door. "It's already past 8, Tina. I can do it first thing in the morning." "I can do it first thing in the morning. I'll even wake up earlier," she offered, trying to keep her voice even. Tina rolled her eyes dramatically. "You don't get to decide when things get done. You're not the boss here, remember?" She shoved the dress into Rina's hands. "And while you're at it, clean my nude heels. They have dirt on them. Oh, and my pink purse, too. You, use the leather cleaner in my closet." Rina swallowed her irritation and nodded, then turned to head toward the laundry room. As she passed their tiny shared bedroom, she glanced at the nightstand. The lottery ticket was still there, tucked under the corner of her mother's old Bible. She paused, then went into the kitchen, set up the ironing board in the living room, and began pressing the dress. Tina sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, humming to herself, completely unbothered. The iron was hot, too hot. Rina was distracted. Her mind spun with the errands she'd have to juggle tomorrow, the groceries still unpacked, the pain in her lower back. And suddenly, a burnt smell filled the room. Her heart sank. Tina wrinkled her nose.
"What the hell is that smell?"
Rina lifted the iron and stared in horror at the brown mark now etched into the delicate fabric. "Tina, I'm so sorry. The iron was too hot, and you ruined my dress," Tina exploded, springing up from the couch. "Are you jealous? Is that it? You knew you'd never wear anything this nice, so you destroyed it?" "That's not true," Rina said, stepping back. "You gave me 3 things to do at once. I was rushing." Before Rina could finish, Tina grabbed the iron. "If you like hot things so much," she hissed, and before Rina could dodge, she pressed the edge of the iron against Rina's forearm. Rina screamed, stumbling back, clutching her searing skin. "You don't get to scream," Tina barked. "You should be grateful I don't call the police for destroying my property." But Rina had had enough. Her body trembled, not with fear, but rage. She lunged, grabbing Tina by the hair and dragging her off balance. Tina shrieked as Rina slapped her twice, fury breaking loose after years of humiliation. Marla burst in, heels clicking across the tiled floor. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "Mom! She burned my dress and attacked me," Tina wailed, rubbing her cheek. "You lying snake," Rina snapped. "You burned me." Marla didn't wait for explanations. She lunged at Rina, grabbing her by the hair and slapping her hard. Tina joined in, and within seconds, Rina was fending off both of them. Mira ran in, panic on her face, and forced herself between them, pushing her daughter behind her. "Enough!" Mira shouted, her voice trembling with emotion. "That's enough. We've had enough." "You don't get to shout at us," Marla snapped. "We pay you." "You pay us to work, not to be abused." Mira's voice cracked but held firm. Rhina pulled Mira close, shielding her from Marla's next move. "We're done," Rhina said coldly. "You don't have to tell us to leave. We're leaving." Marla laughed bitterly. "And go where? You'll be crawling back here in a week. You're nothing but beggars with a mop and dreams." But Rhina didn't answer. She led Mira to their room, the pain in her arm flaring with every movement, and they packed in silence. The moment they stepped out of the servants' quarters, they didn't look back. And as they closed the gate behind them under the moonlight, a promise formed in Rhina's heart. They would never return to this kind of life again. The sun was barely up when Rhina and Mira stood outside the government office, a folded paper clutched in Rhina's trembling hands. The official confirmation of their lottery win. The numbers were real. The money was real. Their old life was over. And yet, as they stood there in silence, watching people pass them by on the street, they felt oddly still. Like the weight hadn't fully lifted yet. "We're free now," Rhina whispered, more to herself than to her mother. Mira nodded slowly, eyes moist with quiet disbelief. "Yes, Anak. God heard us." The next few days moved like a dream. They met with lawyers and financial advisors. They were cautious, almost paranoid, keeping everything secret, not wanting to tempt fate or gossip. The world didn't need to know, not yet. They opened bank accounts under new names, wore masks and caps in public, and even had groceries delivered to a friend's house to avoid questions. But one decision came naturally to Rhina. She wanted to build. Not just a home, but a statement. She found a property across the street from Marla's grand house. A plot of land with a wild garden, long overlooked because it was considered unlucky by neighbors. That didn't scare Rhina. In fact, it made her want it more. "We'll build our dream there, Ma," she said one evening, showing Mira the plans on her tablet. "A real house. Our house. With sunlight, a big kitchen, and a proper garden." Mira looked at the screen, at the elegant sketches and proposed designs. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "But do we really need it to be that big?" "It's not just about the size," Rhina said with a smile. "It's about never having to feel small again." They hired a respected architect from out of town and interior designers sworn to secrecy. All purchases were made through third-party services. Rhina insisted on buying the best. Imported chandeliers, custom hardwood floors, high, and kitchen appliances. She wanted every corner of the house to scream that they were no longer invisible. Meanwhile, the transformation in their lives began slowly. No more standing in corners, waiting for insults. No more locked pantries or iron burns. They rented a temporary condo far from their old neighborhood. Mira began wearing soft linen dresses instead of worn-out uniforms. Rhina, for the first time, walked with her shoulders back, head high. She enrolled in business management classes online and started keeping a journal of ideas. Investments, charitable projects, future ventures. One night, while sipping hot tea on the condo balcony, Mira broke the quiet.
You want to build that grocery store, don't you?
Rhina smiled. Hope Mart, she nodded. R for Rhina. R for Rhina. A place where people can buy what they need without being judged. Fair prices, clean, maybe even offer free food days for struggling families. Mira took a sip of tea, her eyes full of pride. Your heart hasn't changed. That's the real blessing. But not everything was warm and peaceful. As the mansion's framework rose, gossip swirled through the old neighborhood. Marla, standing in her own balcony, noticed the construction with narrowing eyes. Tina sneered. Probably some foreigner building it. They'll ruin the look of the block. They had no idea what was coming. One morning, a delivery truck arrived at the mansion site. Crystal chandeliers, hand-carved furniture, velvet drapes, all marked with Mira and Rina's initials. The workers chuckled as they read the boxes. New rich folks, huh? Rina watched from a parked car across the street, sunglasses hiding her smirk. She saw Tina glance out the window, puzzled by the initials. It gave her a thrill she didn't know she needed. Later that night, as she and Mira sat on the floor of their condo surrounded by swatches of paint colors and samples of marble countertops, Rina held her mother's hand. They laughed at us, Ma, mocked us, said we'd never be more than maids, but soon they'll see. Mira gently squeezed her fingers. Don't let your heart harden, Anak. We didn't survive to become like them. I won't, Rina said, but I will make sure they know. Dignity may take time, but when it returns, it shines brighter than gold. The day the mansion was completed, Rina stood on the front steps in quiet awe. The marble glistened under the morning sun, and the large oak doors gleamed with fresh polish. The garden smelled of jasmine and new soil, and the wind rustled gently through the hanging vines that Mira had chosen herself. They'd done it, every painful day, every sleepless night, every whisper of prayer had led them here. Inside, Mira was walking through the rooms barefoot, running her fingers along the smooth wooden banisters, smiling to herself. I still can't believe this is ours, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It feels like we're living in someone else's dream. No, Rina said firmly, stepping beside her. This is ours. Every inch of it. We earned this. They didn't throw a housewarming party. They didn't invite neighbors. Everything was quiet, intentional. A silent revolution. Word still hadn't spread that Rina and Myra were the new owners of the grand estate across from Marla's, and Rina planned to keep it that way. Just a little longer. Then one afternoon, the moment she'd been waiting for arrived. The doorbell rang, and when Rina opened the massive gate, Marla and Tina stood on the front steps, holding a Tupperware dish awkwardly between them. Their expressions changed the instant they saw Rina. Not horror, but confusion. The kind of confusion that walks hand in hand with denial. Rina, Marla asked, blinking rapidly. You work here now? I didn't know they hired help already, Tina chimed in, forcing a smirk. Is your mom cleaning too? Still can't stay away from mops, huh? Rina leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. She didn't invite them in. Why are you here? We came to welcome the new owners, Marla said stiffly, lifting the food container. Homemade spaghetti. You know, neighborly gesture. Tina glanced around. I mean, this place is decent. Still doesn't feel like the old money houses, but whatever. Who even owns this thing anyway? Mira appeared behind Rina, dressed simply but glowing. Is something wrong? She asked. Marla's brows shot up. Mira, you too? Let me save you the trouble, Rina said calmly. We don't work here. We live here. Tina laughed nervously. What are you talking about? You too? You can't? Should I get the title deed so you'll believe it? Rina snapped, her voice calm but razor sharp. Marla's face turned pale. She glanced around the grand entrance. The polished marble, the elegant lighting fixtures, the imported furniture visible through the door. And realization began to dawn. This is your house, she asked. Rina nodded.
Bought the land, designed the place, paid every cent ourselves. Surprised?
Tina scoffed. Let me guess. You robbed someone? Won a lawsuit? There's no way you... We won the lottery, Rina interrupted, 6 numbers. That's all it took. But the real win wasn't the money. It was getting away from you. Marla stared, her lips slightly parted, but no words came. We won't be needing your spaghetti, Rena added. You always said we didn't belong at your table, remember? So we built our own. Mira's voice was gentle as ever, but firm. What we needed back then wasn't food. It was respect, and you never gave us that. Marla's mouth opened, as if to respond. But Tina tugged her arm. Let's go, Mommy, she muttered. This is ridiculous. They turned and walked away slowly, their footsteps oddly small against the stone path. Rina watched them until they disappeared through their gate, then closed the door with a soft click. Inside, Mira leaned against the wall, exhaling. That wasn't easy. No, Rina said, but it was necessary. They stood in the hallway of their mansion, a mother and daughter who had once shared a servant's room and now walked across Italian tiles in their own home. There was no need for loud triumph. No grand speech. The silence this time was enough. Rina smiled and whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Now they know. We're not invisible anymore. It had only been a few weeks since Rina and Mira moved into their new home, but the silence on Marla's side of the street had grown louder by the day. The music from her parties had stopped. The driveway, once filled with shiny cars, now sat empty, the tiles gathering dust. At the market, whispers floated past Rina's ears like smoke. Did you hear? Marla's business is falling apart, another woman muttered. They're drowning in debt. Some loan sharks even came to their door. Rina kept her head down, pretending not to hear, but the words settled into her bones. She tried not to feel satisfaction, but after years of humiliation, it was hard not to feel the shift like a change in the wind. One morning, as Rina watered the roses by the front gate, she spotted a moving truck parked outside Marla's home. 2 men were lifting out a large velvet couch. Another was hauling out boxes. She stepped closer, pretending to inspect a wilting leaf, and saw Tina standing on the porch, arms crossed, her face tight with frustration. Inside, Marla paced, barking orders with much less power than she used to. Rina went inside and found Mira arranging groceries in the kitchen. Ma, she said, placing the watering can down, they're moving things out. I think they're selling their furniture. Mira didn't look up. I heard from the market yesterday. Their store closed down last week. They've been trying to keep it quiet, but people always talk. They deserve this, Rina muttered, after everything they did to us. Mira paused, turning to her. Rina scoffed. How can you say that after what they put you through? Because bitterness only poisons the one who drinks it, Mira replied. We're finally free. Anak, truly free. Don't let their downfall steal our peace. Rina fell silent. A part of her still burned with the memory of Tina pressing that iron into her skin. Of Marla's voice, always sharp and condescending. Of the locked pantry, the cold meals, the backhanded insults. She wanted to forget, but the past clung stubbornly. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, the doorbell rang. Rina opened the gate to find Marla and Tina standing outside, each carrying a single suitcase. Their faces were drawn, clothes simpler than Rina had ever seen them wear. Gone were the pearls, the designer heels, the practiced smugness. All that remained was shame. Rina, Mira, Marla began, her voice cracking. Rina blinked, stunned into silence. Tina stood behind her mother, avoiding eye contact, her jaw tight with pride she clearly hadn't fully swallowed. "You want to stay here?" Rena asked, incredulous. "After all you've done to us?" Marla nodded slowly. "We've lost everything. The house is being repossessed. We spent our last money on settling debts. We're not asking for much. Just a roof. Until we figure things out." Rina didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked to her mother, who had quietly joined her at the door. "Child," Mira said softly, "we don't have to be like them. Let's not repay cruelty with cruelty." Rina clenched her jaw. "Fine," she said at last, "but only under one condition." Marla looked up. "Anything?" "You'll work while you're here," Rina said coldly. "Marla, you'll help my mother with house chores. Tina, you'll work at our grocery store. No laziness. No orders. You follow our rules or you're out." Tina flinched. "You want me to work in a grocery store?"
I've never.
Marla reached out and stopped her. "Tina, we don't have a choice," she said, her voice low. Then she turned to Rena and nodded. "We accept." Rina stepped back and opened the gate. "Good. Then come in." As the two women entered, bags in hand, Mira placed a gentle hand on Rena's back. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "I'm not doing it for them," Rena replied. "I'm doing it for us." But deep down, she knew this moment would test them more than anything before, because forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing who they wanted to be now that they were finally free. The first few days were quiet, too quiet. Marla and Tina moved into one of the guest rooms, bringing with them an uncomfortable silence that clung to the halls like humidity. Rina watched them with measured eyes, her guard up. Mira, as always, welcomed them with gentle words and freshly laundered sheets, treating them as guests, not intruders. But Rena hadn't forgotten who they were and what they'd done. She didn't plan to let them forget, either. On their third morning in the house, Mira was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Rena came down the stairs and found Marla seated at the dining table, sipping tea, flipping through a fashion magazine. "Good morning," Rena said, trying to sound neutral. Marla glanced up. "Morning." Rena paused. "Isn't today your day to help Ma with the laundry?" Marla set down the cup with a soft clink. "Oh, I think she's already started." She said she didn't mind doing it alone. "She didn't mind because she's too kind to say otherwise," Rena replied, her tone cooling. "But that doesn't mean she should be doing it alone." "I just thought," Marla began, but Rina didn't let her finish. "You're not here as a guest, Marla. You agreed to help. Please don't make us regret this." Later that afternoon, at Arm Hope Mart, things weren't going any better. Tina had been assigned to help stock shelves, but she spent most of her time scrolling through her phone, occasionally flipping her hair and sighing loudly when asked to do anything. "Can you restock the cereal aisle, please?" one of the workers asked politely. Tina looked at the boxes and groaned. "Do you know how long my manicure took? These nails weren't made for lifting cartons." The worker gave her a confused look, then quietly moved to do the task himself. Rena, standing near the register, watched the exchange and felt her patience thinning.
She waited until the customers cleared out before calling Tina over. "Tina, we need to talk."
Tina approached slowly, arms crossed, attitude on full display. "What now?" "This isn't a spa. It's a business. If you're here to work, then work. No one is above the job, not even me." Tina scoffed. "You're acting like you didn't scrub toilets just a few months ago." Rina's eyes flashed. She took a deep breath, holding herself back. "Exactly. I did. I worked hard then, and I still do now. So I won't let anyone, especially you, treat this place or the people in it like trash." Tina rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and walked away without another word. That evening, Rena came home to find Mira in the backyard, hanging laundry. The soft hum of an old folk song floated in the air as she carefully clipped shirts onto the line. "Ma," Rena called out, "where you doing laundry again? Where's Aunt Marla?" She said her back hurt. "And besides, I don't mind," Mira said with her usual smile. Rena sighed and joined her. "That's not the point, Ma. She's taking advantage of you. She's pretending to be too delicate to do laundry. But she was never too delicate to do laundry, but she was never too delicate to raise her voice and slap us before." "I know a knack," Mira said gently, "but some people need to see kindness in order to learn it. I can't force her to change. All I can do is not become like her." Rena shook her head, folding a towel with more force than necessary. "You're too forgiving." "And you're too guarded," Mira replied, not unkindly. "Maybe we balance each other out." For a moment, they stood side by side, quietly folding clothes as the wind stirred the fresh sheets behind them. "I just don't want them to hurt you again," Rena said finally, her voice soft. Mira reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Rena's ear. "I know. But don't worry about me. I've survived worse. What matters now is how we choose to live." Rena nodded slowly, though a fire still smoldered in her chest. She promised herself if things didn't change soon, if they didn't start carrying their weight, she wouldn't let her mother carry it for them. Not anymore. The heat inside her Hope Mart was thick with the scent of fresh bread and overripe bananas. Rina stood behind the office desk, a pen tucked behind her ear, reviewing receipts and tallying up numbers on her calculator. Something wasn't adding up, again. For the fourth day in a row, the cash register was short. Not by a lot, just enough to seem like a small mistake, but it kept happening. Rena rubbed her temple and leaned back in her chair. She double-checked the logs. Tina had been on register duty all 4 days. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. Accusing someone of theft, especially family, no matter how strained, was serious. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did the gnawing instinct in her gut. That evening, back at home, Rena entered the kitchen and found Mira standing beside the sink, gently polishing a silver tray. She smiled when she saw her daughter, but her face looked a little pale. "Ma," Rena said, "you okay?" Mira nodded slowly, then opened the top drawer and pulled out a small velvet-lined jewelry box. "I was looking for my bracelet earlier, the one your father gave me on my birthday. It's gone." Rina's heart stilled. "Gone? Are you sure?" "I've looked everywhere." And Mira hesitated, her eyes clouding. Rina's mind started spinning. Missing jewelry, disappearing cash. 2 different places. 2 familiar faces. "Maybe you just misplaced them," Rena said gently, though her tone lacked conviction. "It happens." "I hope so," Mira replied, though her voice trembled. That night, Rina couldn't sleep. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan rotating in slow circles. Every memory of Tina sneering behind the counter, tapping her long nails on the register, flickered through her mind. She thought about Marla walking around the house like she still owned it, always eyeing the decor, the corners, the rooms. Always acting just a little too curious. The next day, another piece of jewelry was gone. This time a pair of Mira's gold hoop earrings. That was it. Rina waited until after lunch and pulled Myra aside into her bedroom, closing the door softly. "Ma," she said, keeping her voice low. "What if it's them?" Mira looked startled. "Them?" "Tina, Marla, what if they're stealing from us?" Rena, Mira said, shaking her head. They wouldn't. You said yourself, they've lost everything. They're desperate. What if they haven't changed at all? What if they're just pretending? Reina's voice was firm, but not angry, just pained. We can't accuse anyone without proof, Mira insisted. We've forgiven them. We gave them a home. They wouldn't do that to us. I want to believe that, Ma, but believing doesn't bring back the missing money, or your necklace, or your bracelet. Mira fell silent, her lips pressing together in a thin line. Then she nodded reluctantly. I hope I'm wrong, Rena said quietly. But I need to find out the truth. For your sake, for our peace. The next morning, before anyone arrived at the store, Reina returned early and installed a hidden camera near the register. She placed another small device behind the curtain in her mother's room, facing the dresser where the jewelry box sat. It made her feel sick to do it. But she couldn't ignore the signs any longer. 2 days later, she sat in her office with the footage playing on her laptop, her hands cold and clammy. The first video showed Tina glancing around the store before opening the cash drawer. Her fingers slipped several bills into a small zippered pouch she kept under the counter. Then, as if nothing had happened, she rang up the next customer with a smile. Rena paused the video, her jaw clenched. She clicked to the second camera. There was Marla, creeping into Mira's room when the house was empty. She moved slowly, cautiously. She opened the jewelry box, took the gold necklace with the tiny cross, slipped it into her pocket, then closed the lid like nothing had happened. Rena stared at the screen, her heart breaking, her stomach sinking. So, it was true. She leaned back in her chair, blinking hard, rage and grief swirling together inside her chest like a storm she'd held back for far too long. They had betrayed them, again. And this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. That night, Rina sat beside Mira in the living room, the tablet resting heavy in her hands. The footage played in silence, and Mira watched with wide, disbelieving eyes. First Tina, dipping into the register, as if it were her personal wallet. Then Marla, gently lifting the necklace from the velvet box. Her hands precise, practiced. When the videos ended, Mira didn't speak right away. She stared at the blank screen as if hoping it would change, her lips parted slightly, eyes glistening. Ma, Rina said softly. I didn't want to believe it either, but you see now, don't you? Mira nodded slowly. Yes, Anak. I see it. Her voice was barely a whisper. They've been stealing from us under our roof, Rina said, her voice tightening. After everything we did for them, after all we forgave. Mira wiped at her eyes, her shoulders trembling. We took them in, and they spat in our faces. Rina stood abruptly, her resolve hardening. We can't let them stay here another night. Mira hesitated, her kind heart warring with her disappointment. You're right, she said finally. But promise me, we'll do it calmly. No screaming, no bitterness, just the truth. I promise, Rina replied, though her chest still burned with betrayal. They climbed the stairs together, their steps slow and steady. The hallway light flickered slightly as they stopped outside the guest room. Rina knocked once, then opened the door. Marla and Tina were lounging on the bed, chatting idly. Tina looked up, annoyed. Don't you people believe in privacy? Rina ignored the jab and stepped inside, Mira following quietly. We know everything, Rina said plainly. Marla blinked. What are you talking about? You've been stealing from us, Rina replied. Money from the store. Jewelry from Ma's room. Tina scoffed. That's ridiculous. You have no proof. Rina tapped the tablet, held it out. We do. Marla took it hesitantly, and within seconds her face drained of color. Tina snatched it from her. watched the footage, then threw the tablet onto the bed. "This is fake. You edited this." Rhina crossed her arms. "We had hidden cameras installed. Everything you see is real." "You really thought we wouldn't notice?" Marla stood up, tears forming in her eyes. "We didn't mean to. We were just desperate." "You think we weren't desperate before?" Rena snapped, her voice cracking. "We scrubbed your floors, washed your clothes, served your food while you humiliated us. We never stole from you, not once." Mira stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "We forgave everything, Marla. The words, the beatings, the pride. We welcomed you when no one else would." "We were wrong," Marla whispered. "We were so wrong. Please, just one more chance." "No," Rena said coldly. "We already gave you one, and you broke it. You need to leave." Tina stood up, indignant. "You can't just kick us out." "Yes, we can," Rena replied. "This is our home. You don't belong here anymore." Mira placed a hand on Rena's shoulder. "We won't call the police." Silence fell. Marla sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. Tina's defiance faded into quiet disbelief. Without another word, they began to pack. Downstairs, Rhina and Mira waited. They sat on the couch, the air thick with grief. The front door opened slowly. Marla and Tina stood there, each holding a small suitcase. Their eyes red, their pride broken. "I just want to say," Marla began, then paused, struggling. "I'm sorry." "We forgive you," Mira said gently, her voice lined with pain. "Not for you, but for our own peace." Rena nodded. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, or letting people walk all over us again." Tina lowered her head. "We'll leave. We'll figure something out." As they stepped out into the night, the door closed quietly behind them. Rena leaned into her mother's side. "Do you think they'll learn from this?" Mira took a deep breath, her arm wrapping around Rena. "I don't know. But I hope so." They sat there in silence, hearts heavy but free, finally choosing peace over pain, truth over pity, and dignity over damage. The next morning, the house felt lighter. The air didn't carry the tension it once had, and for the first time in weeks, Rhina woke up without a knot in her chest. She walked barefoot across the marble floor, sunlight streaming in through the windows, and found Mira already in the garden, tending to the blooming roses with quiet joy. "They're finally gone," Rena said softly, approaching her. Mira looked up, smiling gently. "Yes. And now we can breathe again." The peace that followed Marla and Tina's departure was almost surreal. Rena returned to managing Arm Hope Mart with renewed energy, the staff livelier, the air clearer. She walked through the aisles and noticed how much smoother everything ran. No sighs of irritation, no drama behind the counter, no more resting hands when there was work to do. She even added new promotions, began investing in local produce, and quietly increased salaries for her most hardworking employees. Back at the house, Mira returned to her soft routines, baking in the mornings, caring for her plants, reading her Bible in the afternoons. She had always found joy in the small things. And now, Rena finally understood why. There was a kind of luxury and simplicity in knowing you were safe, respected, and free. One afternoon, while organizing her office files, Rena came across the old lottery ticket she had framed. The numbers had faded slightly, but the weight of what it represented hadn't. That tiny slip of paper had changed their lives, But what really struck her now wasn't the money. It was how much they had changed. Later that week, Mira invited a few families from their old neighborhood to visit. They'd helped many of them quietly over the past months, paying for school fees, donating groceries, even covering a few emergency medical expenses. One of the children ran up to Mira with a handmade thank you card, and Myra's eyes welled with tears. "Your kindness is contagious, Ma," Rena whispered, watching from the kitchen doorway. "You're changing lives." Mira just smiled, wiping her eyes. "When we were at our lowest, someone out there prayed for us. Maybe now, we're the answer to someone else's prayer." Rena nodded, feeling her heart swell. They weren't just living in a mansion. They were building something that mattered. A few days later, while restocking the store, one of the older vendors from the local market pulled Rena aside. "Did you hear?" he said in a hushed tone. "Marla and Tina are living in the province now, renting a small place near my cousin's, selling secondhand clothes." Rena's eyes widened.
Really?
He nodded. "They're keeping a low profile." That night, Rina told Mira over dinner. "They're starting over," she said quietly, "at the very bottom." Mira looked thoughtful. Maybe that's where they'll find their true beginning. Rina twirled her fork slowly. "I'm not happy about their pain. But I won't lie, Ma. Part of me feels like it's justice." Mira nodded slowly, setting down her glass of water. "That feeling will fade. But what you're holding on to now, it's not justice, it's residue. Let it go." Rena sighed, pushing back in her chair. "I know you're right. It's just hard to forget." "You don't have to forget," Mira said. "You just have to forgive. Again and again, if you must. Not for them." They sat in silence for a while, the soft hum of crickets just outside the window. The house felt full, not just with furniture and comfort, but with warmth, dignity, and peace. Real peace. Real peace. The kind you fought for, the kind you earned. Later that night, Rina stepped onto the veranda. The stars stretched across the sky like silent witnesses. She looked across the street at the now empty house that once held her pain, and then she looked up, whispered a quiet thank you to the heavens, and finally let it go. She didn't need revenge. She had freedom. And that was more than enough. A week passed in calm. The days were filled with rhythm. Arm Hope Mart thrived. Mara's garden blossomed, and the mansion echoed with laughter instead of tension. Rena spent more time with her mother, sometimes cooking dinner together, sometimes just sitting quietly by the window, savoring peace like it was a long-lost luxury. But that peace was interrupted one rainy afternoon when the doorbell rang repeatedly. Rena had just finished sorting through receipts in her office when the urgent chime made her heart stutter. She walked to the gate slowly, half expecting a delivery. When she opened it, her breath caught. Marla and Tina stood there, soaked from the rain, holding nothing but one shared umbrella and a single tattered suitcase between them. They looked nothing like the proud women who used to strut through shopping malls and give out orders like royalty. Their faces were drawn, lips trembling, eyes hollowed by fatigue and hunger. Rina didn't say anything at first. She stood frozen at the shelter of the porch, waiting. "Please," Marla whispered, barely audible over the rain. "We didn't know where else to go." Tina looked away, ashamed, her clothes clinging to her from the storm. Mira appeared behind Rena, her soft gasp breaking the silence. "Oh, dear." "We sold everything," Marla continued. "The business. The apartment. We used it all to pay off debts. We have nothing left." "What do you want from us?" Rena asked, her voice firm but not cruel. "Just a place to stay," Marla begged. just for a while. Until we get back on our feet. Rhina looked into her mother's eyes, expecting hesitation, but Mira's gaze was calm, knowing. Rhina sighed. And why should we trust you, after everything? I don't expect you to, Marla replied, her voice cracking. But I'm asking anyway. Rhina crossed her arms. You can stay, but under one condition. Marla nodded quickly. Anything. You'll work for us, Rhina said. Properly this time. No shortcuts, no whining. You, she pointed at Marla, will do chores, cleaning, laundry, cooking, all of it. And Tina, she turned to the girl, who now looked utterly defeated, you'll work at the store again. But this time, you'll be under direct supervision. No register, no excuses. Tina opened her mouth, but Marla cut in sharply, placing a hand on her daughter's arm. We accept. Rhina opened the gate. Then come in. But know this, one mistake, and you're out. They nodded silently, stepping into the mansion they once mocked. Mira handed them towels, already warm near the kitchen stove. The contrast was stark. Kindness despite betrayal. As Marla dried her face, her shoulders shook with silent sobs. That evening, over a quiet dinner of soup and rice, the air was thick. Rhina barely touched her food, watching the two women eat slowly, as if they hadn't had a real meal in days. Myra chatted gently about the garden, the weather, never once mentioning the past. Her grace, even in silence, humbled the room. After the dishes were cleared, Mira approached Rhina in the hallway. You did the right thing, she said softly. I don't feel like it, Rhina admitted. You will, Mira said. Sometimes doing good doesn't feel good right away, but it makes room. For healing, for change. And what if they don't change? Then we remain the ones who did. Later, Rhina sat by the bedroom window, watching the rain taper into mist. Somewhere below, Marla and Tina were unpacking what little they had. For a moment, Rhina imagined her younger self, scared, exhausted, and hopeless. Stared exhausted and hopeless. Ending on a porch just like this, praying for kindness. Maybe, just maybe, this was her turn to be the answer to someone else's prayer. She closed her eyes and whispered, Let this be the last time we live in the shadow of who we used to be. Forgiveness was not forgetting. It was letting go without losing yourself. And Rhina, for the first time, felt like she'd found herself again. The following week, Hope Mart buzzed with its usual midday rhythm. Customers filtered in and out, chatting, browsing, filling their baskets with canned goods, eggs, and fresh produce. Rhina moved through the aisles with practiced ease, checking displays, adjusting price tags, and offering a kind smile to regulars. From the corner of her eye, she watched Tina behind the cashier's counter. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Tina sat upright, hair tied back, her smile practiced but polite. Yet Rhina had learned to look beyond appearances. She noticed how Tina's phone kept appearing under the counter, how she whispered to certain customers, handing them change with a bit too much confidence, as if she believed no one was watching. Rhina didn't say anything. She waited. She'd already seen the pattern before, the laziness, the entitlement, the excuses. She wasn't going to make the same mistake again, not without evidence. Later that day, after the store had closed and the staff had gone home, Rhina locked the door and returned to her office. She opened the drawer, pulled out the USB from the hidden camera system, and plugged it into her laptop. Her heart beat slowly, steadily, like a drum of warning. The footage revealed it all. Tina, checking to make sure no one was around, slipping bills into the small compartment in her bag, just as she had done weeks before. Rhina clenched her jaw. She'd given Tina a second chance, a chance to prove herself, to rise from her past mistakes. And Tina had chosen betrayal, again. The next day, Rhina came home earlier than usual, needing air, needing space. The sound of soft humming led her to the kitchen, where Mira was baking banana bread. The sweet scent wafted through the room, soothing but bittersweet. "Ma," Rhina said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can we talk?" Mira looked up, concern already forming in her eyes. "Of course, Anak. What is it?" Rhina pulled out a chair and sat down. I reviewed the store footage. Tina's stealing again. Mira's expression didn't change immediately, but her hands stopped moving. The silence between them grew heavy. "And it's not just the store," Rena continued. "I checked your jewelry box again this morning. A pair of your earrings is missing." This time, Mira closed her eyes. "She hasn't changed, Ma. Neither of them have. They're still who they were. Maybe even worse." Mira sat down beside her, folding her hands in her lap. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Rena replied. "I didn't want to believe it. But it's happening again." Mira nodded slowly. "Then we have to do what we didn't do the first time. We end it. No more second chances." Rena didn't expect that answer. She blinked, surprised. "You really mean that?" "I gave them the benefit of the doubt because I believed people could change," Mira said softly. "But change requires truth, and humility, and effort. If they can't bring any of that, then we have to protect ourselves." That night, Rhina stayed up late reviewing the camera footage again, compiling everything. Then, the next morning, just after breakfast, she called Marla and Tina into the living room. The air was tense. Marla looked tired, older than before. Tina wore her usual pout, arms crossed. "We need to talk," Rena began, "about the theft." Tina's eyes narrowed.
Wow!
"The one you committed," Rena said calmly. "We have video footage of you taking money from the register." Again. Tina's face flushed, then paled. "That's a lie." Rena raised her hand and showed them the tablet. "Do you want to see it?" Marla's face crumpled. "Tina, tell me it's not true." Tina stood frozen, lips trembling. "Before shouting, you don't understand. I didn't ask to be here. You think I wanted to end up begging from people we used to feed?" "No," Rhina said, rising to her feet. "But what you did was your choice." Marla reached out as if to stop her daughter, but it was too late. "We let you in. We forgave you. Twice," Rena continued. "But you used our kindness as a weakness. That ends now." Mira, quiet until then, finally spoke. "You need to leave." Tina looked to her mother, desperate. "Mom." Marla couldn't meet her daughter's eyes. "We don't deserve to stay here, Tina. Not after this." There was no screaming. No dramatic exit, just silence and the soft rustle of bags being packed again. As the door closed behind them, Rena looked at Mira and whispered, "Maybe this time they'll finally understand." Mira exhaled. "Or maybe we'll finally stop waiting for them to." The house was quiet again. After Marla and Tina left for the second and final time, there was no dramatic storm, no crashing thunder or wailing voices. Just silence. A calm kind of silence that settled deep into the walls, like peace, reclaiming its place. Rena stood by the window that evening, staring out into the dark street, watching the faint taillights of a taxi disappear around the corner. For a moment, she felt an ache in her chest. Not of loss, but of relief. Mira walked up behind her, gently resting a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "They're gone," she said softly. Rhina nodded. "For good this time." They didn't speak for a while. Outside, the stars began to peek through the navy sky, and the wind rustled the leaves in the garden Mira had nurtured since the day they moved in. "You think they'll ever change?" Rena asked. Mira hesitated, then said, only if they truly want to. Some lessons have to be learned in silence, with nothing left to blame but your own reflection. Rena sighed and leaned into her mother's embrace. I don't wish them harm. I just don't want to carry the weight of what they did anymore. And now, you don't have to. The following weeks moved quietly but beautifully. Hope Mart continued to grow, and Rina expanded the business, partnering with local farmers and artisans, turning the store into a community hub. She and Mira began hosting small gatherings, baking classes for kids, free meals for the elderly, even weekend reading hours in the garden. People came, drawn not just by the generosity, but by the warmth that radiated from the two women who had once been maids and now carried themselves like queens, not because of wealth, but because of dignity. One night, while sorting old photos, Rina found one from years ago, a faded image of her and Mira sitting on a wooden bench behind Marla's old mansion, both in aprons, their hands red from scrubbing tile floors. She stared at it for a long moment, then showed it to her mother. "We've come far, haven't we?" she whispered. Mira took the photo and smiled. "Farther than I ever dared to dream." They placed the picture inside a memory box, not to dwell on the pain, but to remember the path they'd taken. That was the difference now. The pain no longer controlled them. It had shaped them, yes, but it no longer defined who they were. One evening, as they sat together on the veranda, watching the garden lights flicker like fireflies, Rina broke the comfortable silence. "Ma, if they ever come back again, what would you do?" Mira thought for a long moment before answering. "I'd offer them food. A bed if they truly needed one, but not a place in our hearts. That's something you earn, not something you take." Rina smiled softly. "I used to think forgiving meant letting people back in. But now I know. It's just letting go of the anger." Mira nodded, and making room for better things. As the wind carried the scent of jasmine and fresh soil, Rina looked up at the stars, her heart light. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Not to Marla, not to Tina, not even to herself. She had built a life worth living, one full of purpose, compassion, and quiet strength. Some nights she still thought of them, of how quickly power had made them cruel, and how slowly they had fallen from it. She didn't wish them pain anymore. She wished them understanding, growth, maybe even peace. She hoped they found it. And as she reached over to hold her mother's hand, she knew without a doubt that the truest wealth they'd ever gained wasn't the mansion, the money, or the respect. It was this stillness, this peace, this love that had carried them through every storm and would continue to light their way forward. Rina leaned her head on Mira's shoulder and whispered, "We're free, Ma." And Mira, smiling beneath the stars, replied, "Yes, a knack. Truly free." Life lesson. This story reminds us that true wealth is not measured by the house we live in or the clothes we wear, but by the kindness we give, the dignity we uphold, and the love we carry in our hearts. Rina and Mira's journey proves that hardship doesn't have to harden us. Even when they were treated unfairly, they chose compassion. Even when they were betrayed, they chose forgiveness. They showed that while revenge may feel satisfying for a moment, peace lasts a lifetime. What we do with power says more about us than how we act in weakness. And sometimes the best kind of justice is not about seeing others fall, but about rising above what they did to us, and living a life so full of grace that their bitterness can't touch us. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing to be free, and helping others, even when they don't deserve it, is a reflection of who we are, not who they are. So if life has ever put you in a place where you were underestimated, mistreated, or made to feel less than, take a deep breath Your story isn't over. Keep your dignity, stay kind, and trust that what is meant for you will always find its way. If this story touched your heart or made you reflect on your own journey, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming, powerful stories like this one. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong.